bless you today. Monorepos, that's the way to go.
Yeah.
It was all microservices a while back, but now we're back to monorepos. Looking forward to this talk, and thanks again. Second LNUG talk. Take it away.
Thank you.
Well,
Well, hello everyone. So thank you for coming here tonight. My talk is going to be about monorepos, and I kind of like to title the talk to be the monorepo survival training. Not that this microphone survived it. Okay, so first things first, a bit about me. So I am a software engineer at Parameter Solutions, and on the side as well, I'm building Noodle, which aims to be kind of a productivity system for students. We grossed over 11,000 GitHub stars actually, and I'm now basically trying to build it. And kind of the main point here is that I like to think of myself as a monorepo enthusiast, and I've built this thing called OrbitKit, which you can see it's a starter kit, but I would actually like to think about it as just a reference for how you can do monorepos, because I just think there is a lot of things that a lot of different guidance around monorepos, and it's kind of hard to know what you should do. You can find me on GitHub and Twitter. It's almost the same username. I just couldn't get the same username on Twitter, so I just added another I. And yeah, so the what and why. Probably everyone here knows what monorepos are, right? Like, hands up if you know what a monorepo is and worked with one. Okay, cool. So a monorepo is basically simply a architecture style that we can use. So instead of splitting every project that we have into its own repository, we can have them all in the same repository. And it kind of looks like this, where you have an apps folder and then a packages folder. It's not like a strict thing that you have to do, but it's what most people do. And the benefits of this is that you can share the code between your different projects. So let's say we have multiple applications and we have one certain UI design system, like a components library that we want every application to use. Instead of like publishing that to npm, downloading it, and with every code change we need to change the version and download it again to our applications, we can let them all live together, and with one change to the UI package, it kind of radiates to the applications, stuff like that. And at the same time as well, this ensures consistency in our code style, because we can share our lint rules, our formatting, prettier settings, all of that stuff. And so our code will look consistent, and we can also manage versions quite easily as well in monorepos. But this is not really the talk about what's good with monorepos, It's actually what's wrong with them. So if you have ever worked with a monorepo, they are complex. They break often, sometimes, depends how you do it, and they're generally hard to get right, and they're not the easiest thing to maintain either, because a month or two down the road, you can just, start having a weird error, and you spend so much time trying to see what happened there. And for me as well, the most important bit is that monorepos are a subject with not much guidance around them. There is often conflicting information about how you should do something in a monorepo, and do you even know what turborepo or NX are? So yeah, basically all of this just creates challenges that you have to go through to get a monorepo setup working. And on the surface, it's like, why should you even do it? And I'm telling you now, you actually should invest the time to do it, because the benefits of it outweigh the costs a lot more. So this is the packages graph in OrbitKit, and it basically says how different packages are all linked together. This is actually using NX for this image, while I'm actually using turborepo for the monorepo. But anyways, a line is a direct linkage between two packages. So for example, to kind of make it a bit simpler, if I focus on the web app, you can then see the direct lines, so the dependencies of web in our monorepo that the web application uses. And this looks fine, but one day we can get to this kind of state where somewhere in some sort of linkage there is an error and it's all now being caught on fire. But obviously you can see that the documentation website is not having errors because it's not linked to anything, right? Because it cannot get on fire. It actually can. Well, with monorepos as well, you actually need to make sure that the package manager itself is working well. How is it putting your dependencies, the third-party dependencies, in the node modules? What is it hoisting and what is it not? It's a lot of things to kind of take care of. And so with this talk, I'm going to be basically exploring, I would say, 3 of my most important survival tips that you need to take care of while trying to build a monorepo. So this is an example. Let me just emphasize that the first survival tip is that you should have a consistent tooling configuration setup. And what I mean by that is, let's firstly look at kind of like a problematic example. This is an example that you might have in a monorepo of a Next.js app's tsconfig, and you can see like it's extending from the tsconfig like back in the root. And on the surface, this looks fine, but it actually does have a problem. And the problem is that you have too many compiler options set in that singular app that you are not syncing these compiler options with anything other than this application. It's a one-off type of option. And you can run into conflicting options if you change something in a package which conflicts with the way the web application is set up. You can run through really hard to debug problems. And so the way basically that I do it in OrbitKit is that I have a folder in the packages folder called config, where I just set configuration presets for every tool that I have in the monorepo. I have presets for tsconfig, I have a tailwind preset, so colors, for example, and all of the design system things are radiated through every package, every application. You don't need to set anything. Even Vite configurations, the storybook, and ESLint is a whole another story that we can talk about for days. But once you do this, you come to kind of this place where the only thing that you're setting in your tsconfig is the includes, the excludes, and some paths, because that's relative. But every compiler option is already set up for you. That makes it so that you want a new application, for example, you just copy over, for example, this tsconfig, and you're sure if you change up the the next.json preset, every application that's using that same preset is going to have that change. So yeah, now let's go to the second survival tip, and that is you should use internal packages until external ones are needed. And the difference between these kind of two words is that internal packages do not build their TypeScript to JavaScript and before actually shipping them. So literally in the exports we just put our TypeScript source code, which actually works if the way that you're consuming them can do transpiling. Next.js, for example, does that. And external ones are the kind of the typical ones that you might know, which is to build the TypeScript code into JavaScript, create the declaration files, and then you can list that in the exports. Now, internal ones are a lot easier to actually get started with. All you need to do is a package JSON, your TypeScript, and you just put that in your exports and you're good to go. However, at some point in scale, your TypeScript LSP will start complaining. It is a lot faster to actually ship out your declaration files with JavaScript rather than TypeScript source code. So I would say you only use external packages if you want the maximum TypeScript LSP performance, and if you really just care about only handling it when it's needed, you start with internal packages until you get into a slow state of your TypeScript LSP, and then you can try something like that out. And the final survival tip before we go on to the demo is you should spend time to get caching right. What I mean by caching is that in a monorepo, most of the times we're not changing every package. We're not changing the majority of the code base to need to build a lot of it. We only need to rebuild, the changed aspects of the monorepo, and we can use something like Turborepo or NX for these kind of tasks. And if you ask me which one should I use, Turborepo or NX, I'll tell you to flip a coin because they're the same. So yeah, basically what they do is that they just never let you run the same task twice because that is just wasted compute. And yeah, so enough with the slides. I'll now show you an example of a monorepo, which is going to be OrbitKit. I'll just need to switch my display. Okay, can you see that? Yep, you can. Is it too big? Is that fine? All right, cool. So this is OrbitKit, and we can start, I guess, with the how tooling is configured. So as I said, there is a config folder with a lot of the tooling configurations. So for example, in ESLint, I am simply shipping presets of configuration that are kind of categorized to the technology that they use. So my base one handles, the kind of the basic plugins and TypeScript ESLint. I have a separate Next.js one, and I have a separate Playwright, so on and so forth. And what that lets you to do is, for example, in my UI package, I then have a separate, obviously, ESLint configuration. But all that it does is that it just extends from what it needs to use. So, for example, it extends from base. We're using React for this package, so we extend the React one. We're using Storybook, so we extend from that. And that's all you need to do. It's really simple. There is not much code there is to, set up something complex as ESLint. And so, yeah, another thing is that the way I am doing, for example, compilation or like building the UI package. So this UI package is an entire one-to-one representation of Chatzy and UI. So it has every single primitive that includes. It just switches to Radix UI colors. But I am using TSUB for actually bundling that. And with TSUB, the way I did it is that I actually handle putting in the required exports in the package.json automatically after build is done. So this bit of code, basically, it grabs from the entry, it figures out what export needs to be there in the package.json, and it writes it in the package.json itself. So as you can see here, that's all taken care of, and you don't have to mess around with something like that because we have, I think, this package has around 56 exports. So you don't need to then manually edit that. It's all taken care of automatically. And now let's talk about kind of the big piece, which is Turborepo. How do you use Turborepo to be, efficient? How do you do it? So then it's, it caches the tasks. And this is the Turborepo that I'm using for this workspace. So I'm actually doing it. For example, the build, it will run the build task of the dependent packages. So let's say the web application is there. It has a dependency over the UI package. Whenever we try to build the web application, it's going to run the build on the UI package beforehand. And as well, like kind of a side thing, it will also run the DB migrations automatically as well. So we set inputs, and what inputs in Turborepo mean is that it will only track these files, and if these files change, it will know that it needs to actually rerun the build. And to show you kind of what Turborepo allows you to do. So if I run the build script here, you can see that it only took 165 milliseconds. That is for the entire workspace, and that is because there has not been any code changes that happened in the workspace for us to actually need to rerun build. And you can do like dash dash force, and it will actually build the workspace without caching. But this is what Turborepo allows you to do, and you can see this as well being very beneficial in your CI pipelines, because if you don't need to rebuild everything, your CI pipelines are going to be faster. You can see it's already taking quite a long time. And what's cool about like Turborepo as well, and all of these Monorepo caching tools, is let's say I change something only in the web application. So I'm gonna say here like your unique user ID. So like, actually I think I might have a cache in this one, so I'm just gonna get like more ease. So if I do run the build now, let me expand this, you will see that it's actually not building the entire Monorepo. It's only building the application. Now, if we would have changed something in a package, for example, that this application depends on, so let's say if we would have changed something in the UI package, then we would need to rebuild also the application, because we're not sure that that code change in the UI, doesn't change something in the application. So yeah, with this, basically, you're doing the bare minimum to get things working. You're doing, the bare minimum basically to save yourself time. And another really cool thing about this as well is that people in your team can share that cache. So if two people have the same code, then if one person runs build, it's not cached for him. The second person that runs it, even though it's another machine, it will be cached, so they will see the 150 millisecond time, something like that. So yeah, that is kind of the outline of, I guess, Monorepos. Another really cool aspect in kind of this setup is the idea behind handling actually Tailwind and environment variables. I'm going to go over the Tailwind one first. So for Tailwind, how many of you here use Tailwind? Okay, so a good few people. But basically, this entire package is only made for one file. And that's actually not a bad thing. It's in Monorepos, you should, split stuff up to packages when it does make sense. And in this case, it does. And we're setting colors here, we're setting stuff up, but we don't want to copy this over for every instance that we need to use Tailwind. And so this package is made. There is no build step for this one. It's an internal package that is exporting the TypeScript file. And what's cool about Tailwind specifically is that it's actually using a library called GT, under the hood to load the configuration file, and that doesn't actually need you, it doesn't make it a requirement for you to build the configuration file. And so we just import it from the package and we use it in the presets list, and that's it. If we change a color or anything in that preset, it's radiated to our entire workspace. So yeah, that is kind of the outline of it. The outline of a good Monorepo setup is that if you're copying something and it looks like it is setting something one-off, where if you change it in another place, it's going to act differently if you don't change it, every occurrence of that, then you should split it into a package and you should then import it that way. Because then, as a good source of guidance, if you have one source of truth in a Monorepo, it's going to be fine. If you have to have multiple references to a lot of things and copying and pasting, then it will eventually mismatch and break. And another thing is that I'm also using a package called T3env, which is actually really cool. It checks your environment variables, and it also auto-completes it for you. For example, in the web one here, if I start doing env dot, it knows about all of the environment variables that are actually accessible to us. And for the environment variable package, I just export a file per application, and that is what I use in that application reference. So in here, for example, I'm using GT so that I don't have to build that application. I mean package, sorry. That's something that you always get mixed up with Monorepos apps and packages. And I'm just using that in the next config, which basically means that this application will not run if the environment variables are invalid. And as well, for the other packages that are internal in Next.js, you need to add it to the transpile packages array, and that takes care of things for you to not need to build the entire thing. So yeah, that is basically that. With Monorepos, there is so much that you can talk about. It's a very large topic, but I hope that with this I kind of give you a kind of an outlook on how I would say a good Monorepo setup looks like. But yeah, I think that is all. I think then I need another. Oh yeah. So that is pretty much it. Thank you. I think you can check out OrbitKit at orbitkit.dev, and also if you're interested as well for Noodle, my other project, and me on Twitter and GitHub. But yeah, thank you all.
Thank you.
If you have any questions, I guess.
Any questions?
Hi, you said like the Monorepo provide a good concept of like sharing the cache between different users or like different developers.
Yeah.
But how do you do that in different? Let's say there is a pipeline which is running in a master branch. There is a pipeline then it is running in a feature branch, and in the feature branch I want to use the cache which was built previously in the master branch.
Yes.
How can I share it? Because sometimes I use Monorepo, and one thing that I noticed is like to store that cache somewhere, because the cache size is so much huge. To upload the cache and to download the cache itself takes like lots of time.
So the way that I do it is I just set the Turbo team and Turbo API key from Vercel, and I let them handle that. So they are the ones, like you will see in here. Let me show you. So you'll see, for example, if I do turbo build, it should be that at the very start of the script itself, it will tell you if remote caching is enabled or not. Now, this is So for example here, remote caching is disabled because I don't have these environment variables set on the laptop. But in my CI pipeline, it actually says that they are enabled. So once a pull request is done and it has been merged, now it's the same version on master as that PR, and so the caching works, and the pipeline for masters after, like the main branch, after you merge that pull request, it's just super quick because it doesn't need to rebuild anything. So yeah.
So you're saying like a turbo out of the box kind of
Yes.
save the latest cache and download the cache.
Yeah. You literally just need to set 2 environment variables, and that's it. It takes care of the caching for you, like remotely. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other
Thank you.
questions?
There's one in the back there as well.
I think you mentioned package hoisting in passing. How do you choose when to? I assume that means you have a package JSON at the top level and in each of the packages.
Yes. So I do have a root package JSON.
The question was going to be how do you personally choose what to put in your top level package JSON versus
like what dependencies come into the root package
yeah, like
JSON,
would you hoist
right?
TypeScript or your prettier and
Yes,
ESLint,
so
or like
I will show you here. For example, I am setting like ESLint as a dev dependency in my root, and also prettier, because for me I only have my prettier config in the root level. I'm not having a different prettier config per package. You don't actually want to do that. Like, you want to have the same styles for everything. And I am also setting TypeScript as a dependency of root, so then that way every package is using the same TypeScript version.
So they tend to be your dev dependencies, not your runtime dependencies.
Yes, if you're having a dependency that goes into production in your root package JSON, there's probably something wrong going there.
Thanks.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, I think we're going to call it time because it is time.
All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot, Ahmed. So you've heard it all tonight, from monorepos to cloud work step things without a name, and the full stack with TypeScript. Thanks for a great evening. It's not over yet. If you follow Sid, the Pied Piper, he's going to the pub, and he knows which one to go to. The Lower Marsh, it's called, I think, is it?
It's called Draft.
Drafts. It's in Lower Marsh Road. Yeah, okay.
It's not. Yes, that's the one.
Yeah. All right, well, a few of us know where it is, so we can lead the way for a drink on the way home. Thanks all for coming. Hopefully we'll get another one in soon, next month maybe. We've got a couple of talks, potential talks. Thomas has very important information about how to actually leave the building, so don't go.